At Thanksgiving, my sister mocked me for being single. Then I dropped a bomb. Thanksgiving had barely started when Victoria leaned back in her chair, swirled her Chardonnay, and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Still single, Alison? At 34? Wow, that's something."
No whisper. No hesitation.
Just a clean, calculated strike across the mahogany table. Mom's hand froze over the green bean casserole. Dad suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. Nobody defended me. Not one person. I set down my fork, feeling years of swallowed pain crystallize into something harder, sharper. "I wouldn't worry about me," I said quietly. "I'm married." The room went completely silent. Even the grandfather clock in the foyer seemed to stop ticking. They didn't know it yet, but that single sentence was about to blow our family apart. I grew up in this house in Westchester, same oak floors that creaked in winter, same family portraits climbing the stairwell wall, same cinnamon-scented candles Mom lit every holiday season. As if the right smell could convince people we were the perfect American family. But perfection only works from a distance. Get close enough, and you'll see the fractures. The way every conversation somehow circled back to Victoria. The way Dad disappeared into himself whenever conflict emerged. The way Mom's entire face lit up only when her younger daughter entered a room. I used to think I was imagining it. Children create narratives to survive the imbalance, to make sense of why they feel invisible in their own homes. But somewhere between my 20s and my 30s, the pattern became undeniable. Every achievement of mine was quietly downplayed while every milestone of Victoria's became a full family celebration. When Mom and Dad missed my college graduation from NYU because Victoria had a can't-miss sorority semi-formal at Penn State, they called it an unfortunate scheduling conflict. When they skipped my 30th birthday dinner because Victoria was touring wedding venues, Mom actually said, "You understand how important this is for her, don't you, sweetheart?" Like my existence was optional. Like I was a footnote in someone else's story. When I moved to Portland and bought my townhouse without any help, entirely on my own, I texted photos to the family group chat. They hearted them, sure. But nobody asked how it felt to accomplish that alone. Nobody asked about the late nights, the budget spreadsheets, the pride mixed with loneliness. The truth was simple and devastating. They didn't ask much about my life at all. And yet, every single holiday, I still made the trip. 6 hours each way from Portland to Westchester. I brought homemade pumpkin pie, fresh flowers, thoughtful gifts. I tried. Maybe I tried too hard. Evan used to gently tease me about it. "You don't have to earn a place that should already be yours, Allie." I'd smile like it didn't cut deep, like I didn't wonder if maybe I really did need to earn it. Walking up the stone pathway that afternoon, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, that old anxiety that came from knowing I'd spend the next few hours feeling like a guest in my own childhood home. The entryway looked exactly the same, the antique mirror Mom was so proud of, the coat rack tilting slightly left, the Persian rug Victoria had spilled red wine on during high school and somehow never got blamed for. But I wasn't the same. Something in me had shifted months before this Thanksgiving. Some quiet part that finally stopped hoping they'd notice I wasn't okay. When I stepped into the kitchen, Mom hugged me with one arm while basting the turkey with the other. "Alison, honey, you made it." Her voice was bright but distracted. "How was the drive?" Before I could answer, she was already talking about Victoria's honeymoon plans, some luxury resort in Turks and Caicos that Colin's firm was partially comping. Dad gave me a tired smile from across the kitchen island where he was opening a bottle of Cabernet. "Good to see you, sweetheart." That was it. No real questions. No curiosity about my life, my work at the design firm, the promotion I'd gotten last month that I'd mentioned in a text that went unacknowledged. I scanned the kitchen. Victoria wasn't here yet, but her presence dominated every surface. Wedding photos everywhere. The big white Vera Wang dress, the sprawling country club venue, her beaming next to Colin in his tuxedo, images covering the refrigerator like a shrine. My own wedding photo? Not one. Not even a single 4x6 print. My stomach twisted. 8 months. It had been 8 months since I'd mailed those invitations, tracked every single one, followed up with calls and emails and texts. 8 months of silence from all of them. Mom glanced over her shoulder. "You did bring the sweet potato casserole, right?" Of course. That was my role. Show up, contribute, stay quiet, don't make waves. I set the dish on the counter and realized something unsettling. This was the first holiday where I genuinely wasn't sure why I'd come. Habit, maybe. Or that tiny, stubborn hope that this time would be different. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The storm I'd been avoiding wasn't coming. It was already here. Victoria breezed in 40 minutes late, her Louboutin heels clicking across the hardwood like a drumbeat announcing royalty. She kissed Mom's cheek, hugged Dad like he was a returning war hero, then gave me the briefest glance, barely a nod, like I was a vaguely familiar coworker she couldn't quite place. Traffic on the Hutchinson was absolutely insane, she announced, tossing her Burberry coat over a chair. Colin's parking the Audi. Partners at the firm don't get holidays off, you know. Mom's eyes practically glowed. That's what happens when you marry someone ambitious and successful. The words weren't aimed at me directly. They didn't need to be. We moved toward the dining room, and I heard Victoria whisper something to Mom, too soft for me to catch, but sharp enough to make Mom laugh in that quick, conspiratorial way. Dad cleared his throat, that familiar sound that meant he'd heard something uncomfortable he wouldn't address. By the time we all sat down, the hierarchy was crystal clear, Victoria front and center, me fading into the wallpaper. It was a role I'd played my entire life. Talked over, brushed aside, expected to absorb whatever casual cruelty slipped out disguised as family banter. But something felt different in me this year. The words didn't land in the same old wounded place. They hovered, unsettled, like they were searching for somewhere new to go. Mom launched into yet another recap of Victoria's wedding. She never tired of reliving it. The flower arrangements alone cost more than some people's cars. And the venue, Allison, you should have seen it. The club at Sunset Hills. Absolutely breathtaking. I had seen it dozens of times on Victoria's Instagram, which she'd made sure everyone was tagged in. Yeah, it was perfect, Victoria said, swirling her wine with practiced elegance. Everything went exactly how it should. Honestly, I don't know how anyone could top it. She paused for effect. Not that anyone's competing. My jaw tightened. It was always like this. Every success of hers elevated, every part of me erased. Flashbacks hit me rapid fire, Mom leaving my 8th grade band concert early to pick Victoria up from soccer practice. Dad missing my scholarship award dinner because Victoria needed help with a college application essay. Birthdays, graduations, promotions, all of them swallowed by Victoria's gravitational pull. And the worst part? I used to make excuses for them. Used to convince myself they didn't mean it, that I was being too sensitive. But tonight, watching Victoria's smile sharpen every time our parents laughed at her stories, I felt the truth settle like stones in my stomach. She wasn't careless. She was deliberate. And as she clinked her glass, eyes glittering with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences, I knew exactly where this was heading. A jab was coming. And this time, I wasn't the same woman who would just take it. Dinner unfolded like a performance I'd watched too many times. Dry turkey, overcooked Brussels sprouts, Mom fussing with the gravy boat like she could repair our broken family dynamics by stirring harder. But the air felt heavy, charged. Every clink of silverware echoed louder than it should. I sat in my usual spot across from Victoria, the seat where I'd learned to make myself invisible, where I'd perfected the art of swallowing hurt. Colin finally arrived, sliding into the chair beside Victoria with an apologetic smile. He nodded at me politely, the kind of acknowledgement people give when they're not sure whether to engage or ignore you. Victoria immediately leaned into him, her voice bright and performative. An audience of 4 was enough for her to shine. As plates circulated, Mom kept steering every conversation back to Victoria, her new townhouse in Tribeca, her holiday plans in Aspen, her upcoming promotion at the marketing agency. Dad nodded along, occasionally murmuring agreement like he couldn't risk saying the wrong thing. Then Victoria turned her attention to me. So, she said casually, stabbing a piece of turkey. Allison. She stretched my name out, sweetening it until it curdled. Still single at 34. Is that, like, a deliberate choice at this point? Or? Mom inhaled sharply. Colin set down his fork. Even Dad looked up from his plate. I felt the comment land, but not the way she intended. It hit something solid this time, something that had been hardening for years. I wiped my fingers on my napkin and looked directly at her. That's interesting, I said softly. What makes you assume I'm single? Victoria blinked, momentarily thrown off. Well, aren't you? The room held its breath. I could hear the grandfather clock in the foyer ticking unevenly, like even it wasn't sure what would happen next. I set my napkin down carefully. I'm married. Complete, paralyzing silence. Mom's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Dad's whole body went rigid. Colin stared at Victoria like waiting for her to explain what was happening. But Victoria, she laughed. A quick, patronizing sound that didn't reach her eyes. Right. Married. Sure. She smirked. To who? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't her disbelief. What mattered was that I'd finally said it out loud in the one place where they'd never expected me to have anything worth announcing. Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping to that concerned but controlling tone. Allison, sweetheart, if you were married, you would have told us. I did, I replied evenly. No, honey, you didn't. Yes, I said, this time. I did. 8 months ago. Their faces fell in sequence, confusion first, then denial, then something sharper, fear. Victoria scoffed, though her shoulders had tensed. Come on. We never got anything. No invitation, no phone call, nothing. I held her gaze. You didn't get them because someone made sure you wouldn't. Her smirk faltered. Excuse me. Mom's voice trembled. What are you implying, Allison? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my phone, sliding it slowly onto the table like placing down a winning card in poker. Victoria's hand went rigid around her wine glass. She knew something was coming. Maybe not what exactly, but enough to recognize the shift in power. Dad swallowed hard. Allison, what are you talking about? I tapped the screen and opened the first file. And when the light from my phone reflected off the silverware, the entire room seemed to tilt. I'm talking about the invitations, I said. The ones I mailed. The ones that were signed for. The ones that never made it to anyone but her. I didn't point at Victoria. I didn't have to. Every eye at the table landed on her automatically. Her lips parted. Her perfect composure cracked. And I hadn't even shown them the evidence yet. I didn't rush. I let the silence wrap around the table, thick and suffocating, while Victoria's fingers tightened around her wine glass like she could squeeze reality back into submission. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Nobody got anything from you, Allison. If you were actually married, which I seriously doubt, you would have made sure we knew. I turned the phone so everyone could see the screen. I did make sure. The first image was simple, a tracking history. 5 envelopes, 5 destinations. All delivered. All signed for. All on the same morning. Dad leaned closer, squinting at the screen. Signed by who? I zoomed in. The signature wasn't just familiar. It was unmistakable. A looping V that trailed into tight scribble. Victoria's signature. I watched the color drain from her face before she forced out a laugh that sounded strangled. Anyone can sign for mail, Allison. Delivery people mess things up constantly. They didn't, I said. Because I verified it twice. The postal carrier confirmed the package was received at this address, signed by a resident. Mom's eyes flinched at the word confirmed, like it punctured whatever denial she was clinging to. Dad's breathing grew shallow. Colin glanced around the table like he'd been dropped into a conversation in a foreign language. I swiped to the next screen. Email activity logs, I said. The electronic invitations were opened from this house's IP address. Then deleted. Mom clasped her hands together. Maybe your father opened it by accident? I didn't, Dad said abruptly, his voice cracking. I don't even check that inbox anymore. That alone was a revelation. Dad rarely contradicted Mom, and never in front of guests. Mom's gaze snapped to Victoria. Sweetheart, do you know anything about this? Victoria straightened her spine, lifting her chin. No, she said flatly. One syllable, cold as January. But her eyes betrayed her. I wasn't finished. I opened my call log next. I called on May 4th, May 11th, May 18th, 20th, 25th. I listed them slowly, letting each date drop like stones into still water. Voicemails. Text messages. Even a message in the family group chat. Dad frowned. What group chat? The one I created, I said. With all 4 of us. Until someone removed me from it 3 days after I sent the wedding details. That landed like a punch. Even Colin shifted uncomfortably.
Victoria?
Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Victoria slammed both palms on the table, so hard the silverware rattled. Why are you attacking me? Because you didn't get the attention you wanted? Because your life isn't as exciting as mine? Because you're jealous? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. The deflection. The arrogance. The absolute certainty that if she refused responsibility loudly enough, everyone would protect her like they always had. I'm attacking you? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. You're the one who made sure my wedding happened without my family there. Her jaw twitched. I didn't do anything. Yes, you did, I said. You signed for the mail. You opened the emails. You deleted them. You removed me from the group chat. And you let me believe for 8 months that I meant that little to all of you. Mom gasped softly. Dad closed his eyes. And Victoria, she broke. Not all at once, but in tiny fractures I could finally see spreading across her perfect facade. You're so dramatic, she snapped. You always have been. You take everything so personally. I got married, I said quietly. And none of you came. That stopped her. Stopped all of them. Dad's voice was hoarse. Allison, why didn't you call again? Or come here in person if it mattered that much? That old, familiar pain sparked inside me, but I didn't raise my voice. I did call. Over and over. I gestured to the phone. I sent reminders. I begged. I chased the people who should have been chasing me. Mom pressed her napkin to her lips like she could blot out the truth. We had no idea. Her voice wavered, the first crack in the story she desperately wanted to believe. But Victoria wasn't done. Maybe, she said quietly, venomously, the invitations weren't meant to be seen. The words fell like acid. Mom stared at her. What does that mean? Victoria's eyes flickered between panic and pride. It means, she whispered, it wasn't a big deal. Her little beach wedding in Oregon. 20 people. Come on. She looked right at me. I wasn't going to let that distract from my wedding. Mine was supposed to be the event. The moment. Dad froze. Mom's hands fell from her face. Colin blinked like he was seeing his wife for the first time. You threw them away, Dad said, his voice breaking. I didn't throw them away, Victoria snapped. I just kept them from creating unnecessary drama. I was getting married, I said quietly. And mine didn't count? She looked directly at me, eyes glossy, jaw clenched. No, she said. It should have destroyed me. Once upon a time, it would have. But in that moment, all it did was clarify everything with brutal, perfect clarity. I see, I whispered. Mom turned to Victoria, and for the first time in years, her voice had an edge. How could you do this? Victoria recoiled like she'd been slapped. Don't make me the villain here. Allison has always been jealous of me. Always. That was the moment. The moment something inside me settled with absolute, unshakable certainty. I'm not jealous of you, I said. I never have been. I'm hurt. And I'm done pretending it doesn't matter. I stood. My chair scraped against the tile, a small final sound that cut through the room like a blade. Where are you going? Mom asked, almost panicked. Away, I said. Away from a table where I've been invisible my entire life. Dad pushed his chair back, half rising. Allison, wait. I shook my head. I spent 8 months waiting. I'm finished. As I turned toward the front door, Victoria's voice followed me, raw and shaky. You ruined Thanksgiving. I stopped. Didn't turn around. No, I said softly. You ruined my wedding. This is just the truth catching up to you. The hallway felt colder than the dining room, like the house itself didn't want me to leave. But I did. I walked past the antique mirror, past the family portraits, past every version of myself that had tried so desperately to belong in a place that never made room for me. And when I stepped outside into the November night, the cold air hit my skin with something that felt startlingly like freedom. Behind me, through the dining room window, I could see them, frozen, stunned, staring at the empty chair where I'd sat for 34 years. For the first time in my life, they had to look at the space I left behind. I drove the entire 6 hours back to Portland in silence, the highway stretching out like a clean line between who I had been and who I refused to be anymore. When I walked into our apartment, Evan didn't ask questions. He just wrapped his arms around me, anchoring me in a way my family of origin never had. "It finally happened," I said into his shoulder. He nodded like he'd been waiting for this moment for months. "And you said what needed to be said." The days after were strangely quiet. Dad called. Brief, cautious conversations, but real ones. He didn't defend Victoria. Didn't try to rewrite the narrative. He just listened. It was unfamiliar. Shaky. But it was something. Victoria sent an email 3 days later. Long, apologetic, the kind of message that sounded like a therapist had helped draft it. Words about recognizing her behavior, and working through her issues, and hoping we could heal. I read it twice. Then closed my laptop. Healing wasn't a door I could walk through on command. And I wasn't obligated to meet her halfway just because she'd finally acknowledged what she'd done. Mom stayed silent. And for once, her silence didn't tear me apart. It clarified things. Showed me exactly where I stood in her priorities. Evan's family invited us to their belated Thanksgiving the following weekend. His mom, Diane, hugged me at the door and immediately asked about the design project I'd been working on. His sister, Kate, wanted to hear about Portland, about the new coffee shop I discovered, about me. They saw me. And as I sat at their table, surrounded by warmth and genuine curiosity and laughter that included me instead of happening around me, I realized something almost frighteningly simple. This felt like home. In the weeks that followed, the ache softened into something I could finally set down. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but clarity. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was someone who chose her own peace, her own family, her own life. And that choice felt steadier than anything I'd ever begged my parents for. If you've ever had to walk away to protect your heart, you're not alone. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and share your story if you're comfortable. And if this one stayed with you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.